Picture this. Your kitchen sink springs a leak, right? Water is just dripping everywhere, panic sets in, and you grab a roll of heavy-duty waterproof tape.
Right, the classic quick fix.
Exactly. You wrap it tightly around the pipe, and, the dripping stops. You wipe your hands, step back, and honestly, you feel like an absolute genius. You solved the crisis.
For now, anyway.
Yeah, exactly, for now. Because, fast forward, I don't know, 8 months, you're away on vacation, that tape finally gives out under the accumulated water pressure, the pipe bursts, and you come home to a flooded house and like $30,000 in water damage.
Oh, man. I mean, it is the ultimate human trap. We are just incredibly adept at finding a solution that neutralizes the immediate pain point. We stop the leak, and the moment that discomfort fades, we completely stop asking questions. We rarely pause to consider the invisible pressure building up behind that tape.
And that is the exact mission for today's deep dive. We are looking into the concept of long-term consequences and the practice of foresight. Like, why do you and I, and pretty much everyone, default to seeing only what is right in front of us?
It's a huge question.
It really is. And we're exploring this through the lens of Alaska Cultural Standard B3, which is this really profound framework.
Yeah.
It demands that we make appropriate choices regarding the long-term consequences of our actions. It requires us to move past the very simple question of, well, what happens next?
Because asking what happens next is essentially just checking if the tape held.
Right.
Yeah, responsible decision-making requires us to look much further down the timeline. We have to train ourselves to ask, okay, what happens later? What accumulates over time?
Yeah.
And, when we implement a fix, who actually benefits? And who is left carrying the long-term cost or the risk?
Those are heavy questions.
They are. We also need to ask, what happens if this choice becomes impossible to reverse? And maybe most importantly, when do we agree to reconsider the decision if the evidence changes?
I mean, I'm exhausted just hearing that list. Honestly, if I had to ask myself all those questions every single time I made a choice, I'd probably be paralyzed.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that points to the core of the issue. Before we can even attempt to adopt this kind of systems thinking, we have to acknowledge that our own brains are actively fighting against it.
They really are. The neurobiology of decision-making completely works against us here. I mean, we like to think of ourselves as these hyper-rational, forward-thinking beings, but our biological hardware was built for a very, very different environment.
Right, we're still running on ancient software.
Exactly. And a major bottleneck is simply our working memory. The human brain, even a fully developed adult brain, can only hold roughly 4 to 7 chunks of new information in active memory at any given moment.
Just 4 to 7.
That's it.
So if I am juggling the immediate crisis of a leaking pipe, plus my budget, plus my schedule for the day, I literally do not have the RAM left to process what happens to the plumbing infrastructure 10 years from now.
Exactly. But wait, let me take that even further. That working memory limitation, that applies when you are completely relaxed.
Oh, wow.
Right. But the reality is the most critical decisions we make, whether it's fixing a house, passing local legislation, managing a natural resource, they're usually made under conditions of stress, anxiety, or scarcity.
And when stress enters the chat, rationality usually leaves.
It literally does. The physical mechanics of it are fascinating. When you feel threatened or pressured, your brain's amygdala sounds the alarm. Your body just floods with stress hormones, specifically glucocorticoids like cortisol.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. Glucocorticoids. Give me the human translation for those of us who, didn't go to medical school. What is that actually doing to my brain?
Fair enough. Think of cortisol as a chemical override switch. When it floods your system, it actively inhibits the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Which is where?
That's the region of your brain located right behind your forehead. It's basically the command center responsible for complex planning, critical thinking, and evaluating delayed harms.
So it just shuts down.
Yeah, under stress, your brain effectively closes the long-term planning department. Because, evolutionary history taught us that surviving the next 5 minutes is vastly more important than planning for the next 5 years.
Wow. It's like trying to play a highly strategic game of chess while a fire alarm is blaring in the room.
That's a perfect way to put it.
You aren't calculating 5 moves ahead anymore. You are just grabbing the nearest pawn to block whatever's right in front of you, just to make the noise stop.
Yes. And the discomfort of uncertainty, that is a psychological fire alarm. We crave immediate rewards and quick fixes just to turn off the alarm. We ignore incomplete information because, well, Acknowledging what we don't know creates anxiety.
That makes so much sense.
But because our brains default to the immediate, we simply cannot rely on raw instinct to make systemic choices. We have to build an external, deliberate framework. We need to learn how to decode the different types of consequences before they actually hit us.
Okay, so let's break down that framework. How do we categorize these consequences so we can actually spot them in real life?
Well, the first critical distinction is between direct and indirect effects. A direct effect is super straightforward. A change in a resource immediately impacts whatever consumes it. So if a drought kills the grass, the deer go hungry.
Right. Cause and effect.
Exactly. But an indirect effect is when that initial change cascades through a system and impacts a completely different, seemingly unrelated population.
Like spraying a new pesticide to get rid of beetles on your crops, which works great, but then the local bird population completely collapses because you accidentally removed their primary food source.
That is a textbook indirect effect. Next up, we have to distinguish between immediate and delayed consequences. We are visually wired to notice sudden change, a tree falling, a landslide.
The big stuff.
Right. But we are notoriously blind to gradual change. Think of the slow wear of a granite riverbed due to the friction of sediment. It takes thousands of years. It's totally invisible on a Tuesday afternoon, but over time, it entirely reshapes the geography of a continent.
Which brings us to intended versus unintended effects. And in the material we're looking at today, there is a historical case study that perfectly illustrates how disastrous an unintended effect can be. I am talking about the Osborne Reef disaster of 1972.
Oh, this one is just wild. This is one of the most stunning failures of systems thinking in modern engineering. So in the early 70s, off the coast of Florida, there was a massive project with two intended goals. First, they wanted to build an artificial reef to boost marine life and create fishing habitats.
Okay, noble goal?
Right. And second, they needed to dispose of an overwhelming amount of local landfill waste.
So their brilliant idea was to dump 2 million used car tires into the ocean.
Yes.
Which, I have to be honest, I want to defend these engineers for just a second here. In 1972, recycling was barely a concept. You have a mountain of rubber tires, you need to build a reef structure for coral to grow on. Binding them together and sinking them sounds like a highly efficient two birds, one stone solution. So why didn't it work? Was it just terrible luck?
It wasn't luck at all. It was a fundamental failure to define the boundaries and the physical realities of the system they were entering. They treated the ocean floor like an empty, static warehouse. And they used steel clips to bind the tires together, completely ignoring the chemical reality of saline water.
Wait, steel clips. Saltwater corrodes steel.
Rapidly. The steel clips rusted away and the bands just snapped. On top of that, they didn't account for the kinetic energy of ocean currents and tropical storms.
Because tires float.
Well, they're relatively buoyant, yeah. So you suddenly had 2 million loose tires caught in powerful ocean swells. They turned into 2 million underwater battering rams, sweeping back and forth across the ocean floor, completely pulverizing the natural, ancient coral reefs they were supposedly placed there to protect.
A fix that became a wrecking ball. Just because they isolated one variable, getting rid of the tires, and completely ignore the chemical and kinetic forces of the environment.
Exactly. And this brings up the most terrifying category of consequence reversible versus irreversible choices. A healthy ecological or social system has resilience. It can absorb a disturbance, like a mild storm or a temporary drop in a food source, and bounce back.
Right.
But if you push a system past a critical threshold, it triggers a regime shift. You cross an invisible line into an irreversible state. You cannot uncrush a coral reef. The system is permanently altered.
So we have this vocabulary now: direct, indirect, delayed, irreversible. But having the words doesn't mean you know how to apply them over a long timeline. I mean, if the human brain is so bad at this, how has any society managed to survive long-term without destroying its environment?
They do it through rigorous generational observation. And this is where Alaska Cultural Standard B3 is so illuminating. It focuses heavily on traditional ecological knowledge, or tech.
I want to tread carefully here, because I think there is a tendency in modern culture to either dismiss inherited knowledge completely or to wildly romanticize it as this, infallible mystical harmony with nature. We aren't talking about either of those, are we?
No, not at all. Treating traditional ecological knowledge as just quaint folklore is a massive disservice to its rigor. Tech is an adaptive empirical science.
Okay.
It relies on thousands of years of systemic observation, hypothesis testing, and refinement by diverse indigenous communities, from the Inupiaq in the Arctic North to the Tlingit and Haida in the southeast rainforests.
So it's kind of like comparing a modern 5-year corporate environmental study to an 11,000-year-old open-source dataset. The 5-year study is heavily funded and very detailed, but it simply isn't around long enough to observe the delayed consequences or the century-long feedback loops.
Exactly. The 11,000-year dataset has already run the simulations. When a community has lived in an extreme, unforgiving environment for millennia, their seasonal practices, their stories, and their harvesting protocols, they are essentially survival algorithms.
Survival algorithms. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, they encode the boundaries of the system and the tipping points. They document what happens when a resource is over-extracted because at some point in their deep history, someone likely made that mistake. And the community recorded the consequence so it would never happen again.
Let's apply this to some real Alaskan case studies, because seeing these two decision-making models collide really drives the point home. Let's look at the fisheries in southeast Alaska.
Yeah, historically, the Tlingit, Haida, and Heiltsuk peoples managed salmon streams with an incredibly complex understanding of indirect system-level effects.
Okay.
They didn't just look at the river, they looked at the entire forest.
The forest. How so?
Well, they utilized selective harvesting, ensuring that a critical mass of salmon always passed upriver to spawn.
Which obviously sustains the fish population. But there's a wider cascade effect there, right?
A massive one. Those spawning salmon eventually die in the rivers, and animals like bears and eagles drag the carcasses into the woods. And the decaying fish transport rich marine nutrients, like marine nitrogen, deep into the terrestrial soil. The salmon are literally fertilizing the towering spruce and cedar forests. It is a fully interdependent cycle.
Then enter the 20th century commercial cannery industry.
Right. Distant corporate interests arrived with a singular goal maximum immediate extraction. They engineered permanent commercial salmon traps at the mouths of these rivers.
Just blocking everything.
The traps were brutally efficient. They caught nearly everything entering the system, completely ignoring the indirect effects on the forest ecology and marginalizing the indigenous populations who had stewarded those waters for millennia.
It is the ultimate manifestation of what happens next. I mean, the trap builders solved their immediate profit goal, but they severed the nutrient pipeline for the entire ecosystem. Which really begs the question for anyone making a structural decision today. When a system fails because of a short-term choice, who actually pays the price?
It's a vital question.
It is rarely the distant shareholders who built the trout. It is the local community that lives on the river.
And we are seeing the consequences of shifting system boundaries play out violently right now in the Yukon River. The crash of Western Alaska salmon is one of the most stark examples of a tipping point you will ever see.
Tell me about the numbers there.
Well, by 2021, the summer and fall chum salmon runs on the Yukon declined by roughly 90% from their historical baseline.
90%. That is apocalyptic for a food system.
It gets worse. In 2022, only about 12,000 adult Chinook salmon crossed the Canadian border. The management target was 52,000.
Who does an entire river system crash that fast?
Yeah.
And what is the actual mechanism driving that?
It is a devastating combination of variables, largely driven by changing climate inputs. As average air temperatures rise, the water in the river systems heats up. And this introduces a hard physical boundary condition.
Which is?
Warmer water physically cannot hold as much dissolved oxygen as cold water.
So the river is literally losing its breath.
Yes. Now compound that with another issue. Early snowmelts and shifting precipitation mean stream flows are often much lower. So you have dense populations of migrating salmon crowded into shallow, restricted, abnormally warm pools of water.
The fish are panicking.
They're totally stressed, so their metabolic rate increases, meaning they consume oxygen even faster.
Oh, man.
Add in the microbial decay of fish that have already spawned, which also sucks oxygen out of the water, and you trigger a localized hypoxia feedback loop. The oxygen levels plummet so fast that the fish simply suffocate.
That's horrifying.
The river flips from a life-sustaining environment to a lethal one. It is a system-level cascade that threatens the fundamental food security and cultural fabric of the communities along the Yukon.
It is a terrifying biological shift. But these regime shifts, they happen physically too, right? We see this in the coastal erosion happening in places like Shishmaref.
Yeah, Shishmaref is a native village situated on a barrier island in the Chukchi Sea. For generations, the community relied on a very specific, stable physical system. The land was anchored by solid permafrost. Right. And crucially, sea ice formed early in the autumn season. That sea ice acted as an immense physical shock absorber against violent autumn storm surges.
But if the warning temperatures in the ocean delay the ice from forming,
The shock absorber is completely gone. Simultaneously, the warming air melts the permafrost, turning the island's solid foundation into soft, easily eroded mud. So when the massive autumn storms roll in now, the waves violently batter a softened coastline with absolutely zero ice to break their momentum.
and the land just dissolves into the sea. And, you can't just slap a concrete seawall on melting mud and call it a day.
You really cannot. This is an irreversible threshold. Once that land washes away, it is gone forever. The entire community faces the agonizing, astronomically expensive reality of total relocation. The system has experienced a permanent regime shift.
It seems like removing just one protective element, whether it's sea ice in the Arctic or a keystone species in the ocean, can bring down the whole house of cards.
The sea otters is the classic example of that biological house of cards. In the kelp forests of southeast Alaska, sea otters are a keystone predator. Their primary food source is sea urchins.
Okay, tracking.
The sea urchins, in turn, are grazers that eat the holdfasts, the root-like structures of the giant kelp.
So historically, the fur trade comes in, wipes out the sea otters for their pelts. And the indirect effect is what?
A catastrophic trophic cascade. Without the otters keeping them in check, the sea urchin population explodes. The horde of urchins consumes every piece of kelp in sight.
Wow.
Yeah, the entire kelp forest, which served as a three-dimensional nursery and habitat for countless species of fish, crabs, and invertebrates, is eradicated. What is left behind is a barren, rocky wasteland completely covered in starving urchins. Ecologists literally call it an urchin barren.
So by extracting one component for a quick profit, you dismantle the entire biome.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to admit, looking at the Osborne Reef, the salmon traps, the Yukon hypoxia, and the urchin barrens, it kind of induces a paralysis. It feels like every time humanity touches a complex system, we inadvertently destroy it. I mean, if we can't predict all these cascading indirect effects perfectly, how on earth do we make decisions? Do we just stop building, stop innovating, stop interacting with the environment entirely?
Well, that is the crucial pivot here. Responsible decision-making does not require a crystal ball. Perfection is impossible in a dynamic system.
Right.
What it requires is humility, a deep attention to trade-offs, an open acknowledgement of our own uncertainty, and above all, continuous monitoring.
So we have to establish a baseline of what is normal and just watch it like a hawk.
Yes, and Alaskan communities have highly refined tools for this.
Yeah.
Take traditional phenology calendars. Phenology is the study of cyclic natural phenomena. Communities track the highly specific timing of when local resources, like cloudberries or lowbush cranberries, ripen.
But that's not just about knowing when to go make jam. It's a diagnostic tool.
Exactly. It's a vital ecological indicator. They are monitoring the precise timing of the plant's flowering to see if it stays synchronized with the life cycle of local insect pollinators. If those two cycles begin to drift apart because of shifting spring temperatures, it is a glaring warning sign of systemic instability.
There's another example of monitoring that blew my mind, mostly because it sounds like a local carnival game, but it's actually profound climate science. The Nenana Ice Classic.
Oh, I love the Ice Classic. It is brilliant in its simplicity. For over a century, the community of Nenana has erected a large wooden tripod on the frozen Tanana River during the winter. People buy tickets and place bets on the exact month, day, and minute that the river ice will break up in the spring and cause the tripod to move, which triggers a clock.
But because they've been doing this for over 100 years, that betting ledger is now an unbroken, meticulously precise empirical data set.
Yes. It tracks gradual change. It maps the slow, erratic creep of warming spring temperatures long before it becomes a sudden catastrophe. It proves that monitoring baseline truths doesn't require a sterile laboratory or satellite imagery. It can be deeply embedded in the social fabric and joy of a community.
It's about maintaining a dynamic awareness. Because relying on static assumptions is dangerous. It's like taking a single photograph of a marathon.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, the photo tells you exactly where the runners are in that one fraction of a second. But a static photo doesn't tell you who is accelerating, who is nursing an injury, and who is about to collapse from exhaustion. If you bet your life savings on who wins the race based on one photograph, you are going to be disastrously wrong.
We need the entire video, and we need to keep the camera rolling. When the evidence shows that a system is shifting, when the runners start to stumble, we must have the courage and the willingness to revise our choices before the system crashes.
So let's bring this all the way back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. Whether you are an educator shaping a curriculum, a parent navigating choices for your family, or a city council member voting on local infrastructure, adopting systems thinking isn't just an academic exercise for ecologists. It is a vital, everyday tool for community survival.
Absolutely. When you are faced with a choice, you have to force yourself past the cognitive friction. Notice when your amygdala is screaming for the quick tape fix. Step back, look at the whole chessboard, and ask the heavy questions. What is accumulating? Who carries the cost?
And I want to offer one final thought on this. That's something that often gets lost when we talk about being careful with long-term consequences. Because there is a trap here. It's easy to look at the complexity of the world and decide that doing nothing is the safest choice.
Right, analysis paralysis.
Exactly. But in a dynamic, constantly moving system, choosing to maintain the status quo when the environment is clearly changing is not a neutral act. Inaction is a choice, and doing nothing often has the most irreversible, compounding consequences of all.
That is so true. We cannot let the fear of unintended consequences stop us from acting. We simply have to act with deeper awareness. You cannot see every consequence. You can learn to look farther, notice more, and choose with greater care.